Hello, this is Paul Chek. Today we continue my little mini series, if you will, not all strung together, but certainly strung together from session to session here on core values and Dr. Happiness. In my last session, I shared a little bit about one of my core values, Dr. Quiet. Today I'm going to share a little bit about the core value that you can learn about in PPS Success Mastery Lesson 1 in your I Values section called My Spiritual Practice. First and foremost, what is a spiritual practice? Well, my definition of a spiritual person is the one who takes responsibility for what they create moment to moment in their lives. To be a spiritual person means to be aware and to take responsibility for your creative power. A spiritual practice is a practice that a person chooses for their own personal or spiritual growth. To grow spiritually means to become more of what you really are, more connected to that which is beyond the obvious. Spiritual people are largely interested in causes and are progressively less interested in the effects as they grow more and more mature. In other words, a God that will burn you in hell is the cause of sinning. But what causes that God? So the spiritual person asks, well, what kind of God would burn you in hell? And is that really exemplary of what the word God means? So spiritual people, as a general statement, keep working backward to ask what causes that, what is a priori to that, what comes before that. Each of us decides where we're going to stop asking that question, largely based on our inner experience or our program beliefs. Today I wanted to share my spiritual practice just as an example of how I might write my own core values with a little bit extra to just show you why I've chosen this spiritual practice. The first thing I want to look at, though, is what is my myth? Your myth is really a statement of what you believe happens to you without your body. If you lose your body or you die a physical death, what's next? Many people's myth is based on, the Newtonian physics model that if you unplug yourself from the grid of consciousness, which is believed to exist largely because of the interactions of the biochemistry in the brain, then it's essentially screened black, just like you unplug a computer. So that myth really is a broken myth because it leaves you with nothing. Then paradoxically, people believe that there's a heaven and a hell, but nobody can identify where it is, so there's another broken myth. When we are not connected between our biological and intellectual self to our spiritual self, or that which is beyond our own ideas and can only be mentioned as an experience, then we naturally become very afraid of death because we really do not have an inner sense of what may happen to us, or we have an inner sense of what may happen to us from our religious programming, for example, but it scares us to the point that we don't want to die that death, and therefore the concept of death becomes very, very scary, which makes the concept of life scary because no matter who you are, you realize that you can die at any minute because it happens all around us every day. So it can leave a person with a deep sense of insecurity. My question is to always urge, why would the universe create sentient beings if one life was all there was? Because ultimately, the span of a human lifetime is almost insignificant in the span of the Earth, or the span of the life of a sun, or a solar system, or a galaxy, or a universe. So it's almost like, why would your body produce neurons to have sentient experience and to grow and become self-aware, and then all of a sudden pull the plug? It would, to me, it negates meaning. And we all know from our experiences of love that there's deep meaning in love, and it's not the kind of meaning that you say, well, having love means I get to make more money, or having love means I don't have to work so hard because I have someone to wash the dishes, or I don't have to worry about getting laid. Having love always has some kind of deeper meaning, which, if nothing else, means I feel connected to things that I can't comprehend intellectually with ideas, but I can feel in my heart or in my bones, whatever it works for you as, wherever your sensitive places are for feeling things that are beyond the language of explanation. So my myth is built into my philosophy, and my spiritual philosophy, my one guiding principle, my overarching principle of my spirituality, I could have written it up as my own, but in my studies of world religion, which I've done a fair bit of, I found the principles of Sufism, and the first principle of Sufism, which is mystical Islam, and which means they're not practicing the same religion essentially as people reading the Quran. They're mystical, which means they're out there, baby. And you have mystical Kabbalah. So in the Jewish faith, you also have these people that practice mystical Kabbalah, which are sort of esoteric, just like the Sufis are different. And you have Christian mystics as well, and you know, these are common divisions. It's basically the people that get tired of believing in books start getting into interesting practices like what's beyond what someone else wrote down. The Sufis are very, very interesting and very powerful people. Look up Hazrat Inayat Khan. Hazrat Inayat Khan, and he's got a beautiful series of books, stunning writings. As an example, the first principle of Sufism is, there is no God but God. I worship everything, I put the dash in there myself, and everyone. There is no God but God, I worship everything and everyone. So, if God as a concept is real, it means there's nothing here but God. Everything you see is an expression of the divine, therefore it's all holy, which almost all the enlightened beings have been telling us for as long as people have been scratching on stones and talking and recording. So, personally, I feel that that principle is beautiful with or without God, because if you get rid of God, you could just say, there is no one but us. I worship everything and everyone because it's all we've got, and if we don't get along, we're going to kill each other. And if there is no God, that means there's nothing to look for after life, because there's nothing beyond the physical. Therefore, all we have is each other in life and the resources that we have to share. And paradoxically, the person that believes there is no God but God, I worship everything and everyone, also worships the planet, also worships other people. So you don't even need a concept of God if you really understand that all we have is each other and our relationships and the resources we have. And to the degree we learn to get along, love each other, and share, life becomes more like a party and less like a battle. So I believe this beautiful philosophy can be practiced by anyone who has gone through enough meditation to actually reduce all this sort of talk and words down to A, what is consistent with my experience, and B, what do people that may be more enlightened than I do, or than I am, have to say about these issues. So that said, here's a little model that I drew up for you. Capital G, capital O, capital D equals an absolute God. By scientific definition, an absolute cannot be measured. So if you look in the Tao Te Ching and listen to what Lao Tzu says about the Tao, he says, it is older than God. Ah, there's a hint for you. It means whatever our concept of God is, the Tao is older than that. It can't even be known. It's fathomless. It's depthless. You can't even put words on it, because any attempt to circumscribe capital G, capital O, capital D produces some kind of slice in the pie. If God is red, you exclude everything else. If God is Christian, God is Muslim, God is whatever, you can't have God as an absolute, because you've identified a specific quality or character, which is why I assign God as the absolute to unconditional love, because there is no condition in an absolute. The only possible qualities that are there is that the unconditional or the absolute includes everything but is nothing, because you can't measure it or know it. Well, that sounds quite godly to me, there without being there, everything and nothing. The highest is the lowest. Okay? equate that to consciousness because if there is no God, there's no basis for the potential to express as something. Therefore, consciousness itself has to be a quality inherent with God, or there would be nothing to direct the creation or the expression of the absolute as the relative. You might say it would just be total chaos. That's my own opinion, of course. Now, when we use the word God as it is used here in the Sufi dictate, or as in the Bible or any other religion, God actually means the totality of all that can be known as this or that. All human beings, all living things, all knowable things. The universe, whatever you want to include in there. But those are not absolute things. Anything that can be known can only be known because there's something else you're not identifying. I'm a man, that means you're not recognizing me as a woman. You're excluding that possibility. So all things in totality are made of vibration, so anything that's moving falls into the category of Tai Chi, the feminine and the masculine force, the empty and the full. To draw in, to express out, to compress and zip, and to expand and unzip. David Bohm's implicate becomes the explicate, becomes the implicate, and vice versa. So God essentially means that which is contained within the sphere of existence itself, but still you see I worship everything and everyone. The difference is this God is the deification of that which can be known or knowable through the senses, or through some form of perception as something, and many attempts are made to define this God, which is the basis of all religious wars and religions themselves. Next, within God, capital G, little o, little d, we have gods. And all of us can only be an expression of what is an a priori first principle. Therefore, God, the absolute, has to be invested in the relative, because the relative has the two qualities of the absolute, something and nothing. And all things that are gods are what I call sentient beings with awareness of the fact that they have an inside or an outside. An inside, which means myself, relative to the grand whole which supports me. So you could say the world is our self. All of us drink water from here. We all eat food from here. We all breathe air from here. And my exhalation becomes a Chinaman's inhalation tomorrow, just like nuclear waste makes it around the globe. So really the self means that which is the greater truth of all of us. Any ego cannot exist without the self, not in this realm of relativity. So looking at this, we can see that all of us as spiritual beings first come to know ourself and recognize that we have the potential to create life and to create change, and that we can change how our life is and how others is, which means we have the power of a God. We also have human beings, such as Sai Baba and many others, that can do things beyond the laws of physics and things that we can't conceive as normal, which I talked about in my 4-part series called Miraculous Living. So here we have plenty of evidence that we have the capacity to make change. When we make change in ourselves, we make change in the self, because we're a unit of self, which means we're making change in all of it, which means we are expressing the divine potential. Okay? So really, my last comment is I before we always. Many people get caught up in identifying themselves in spiritual practice by what they're doing for other people, etc., etc. But remember, you can't give what you don't have. I really feel it's very important for each of us to have adequate time to get to know ourselves privately, intimately, to evaluate the thoughts running through our heads, the judgments that we're making, and correlate that with what our dream is as a spiritual person. My dream is to love everything and everyone as equal to myself, as an expression of the divine. So whenever I act, think, or feel in ways that divide me, I know that my spiritual work is to recognize that the pain teacher, that which creates separation, fear, or division, has emerged as a source of awareness in me, and now I have a chance to reprogram myself with what I believe to be true from my most current spiritual experiences. This is what I share with you today as my personal spiritual core value. This is an example of how you establish a core value, and these are examples of reasons why. And remember that if your myth leaves you with nowhere to go, then you will behave as though you're an abandoned orphan, except you are probably going to have a fearful relationship with whatever you perceive God to be, just like an infant whose mother just walks away and leaves it, goes into a state of fear, shock, and paralysis. So if we individuals do not do the work spiritually to identify what it is that's beyond our physical limitation, we're kind of like a chicken that's just come out of an egg that refuses to do the work to figure out what wings are for. When I die, it'll be as though I've broken out of a cocoon. And as Chek says, if a man can dream he's a butterfly, what makes you think a butterfly can't dream he's a man? My myth is that when my physical body comes to its natural end, it'll be like a coconut that gets split open and juice pours out, but what'll pour out of me is that all the time I spent in deep connection with those parts of me that are beyond the physical will have, as Steiner said, built the energetic organs to navigate other planes of existence, other planes of reality, and instead of being a citizen of the world, I will have the opportunity to become a citizen of the universe, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for joining me today.